For the second straight night, the U.S. and Iran have traded new strikes, and President Trump is warning that if Iran does not agree to a deal by today, the U.S. will, quote, bomb the expletive out of them. U.S. Central Command now says it completed the second wave of strikes on Iran, hitting surveillance capabilities, communication systems, and air defense sites. Iran calls that a blatant violation of the ceasefire and hit back, targeting U.S. bases in the region. U.S. allies like Bahrain and Kuwait activated their air defenses. Jordan says it intercepted 20 missiles launched by Iran. Iran is also claiming this morning the Strait of Hormuz is now closed to all vessels, quote, until further notice. CENTCOM is disputing that, saying that commercial ships are still moving through, though we know that the strait has been largely paralyzed. Despite all of this, a diplomatic source tells CNN that talks between Washington and Tehran are still on track. Here's what the president said about it in the Oval Office.
We were really close to a deal, but they keep tapping us along. They keep playing us for suckers.
We have a team in Tehran covering this. Let's start with CNN's Elena Treen live this morning at the White House for us. Where do things stand right now, Elena?
Look, Kate, I think it's clear that we have entered a new phase of this war, and the president really shifting strategy this week and resuming its bombing campaign on Tehran. Now, if you listen to what the president said yesterday, as well as the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, both of them almost arguing that this is a way to negotiate and that the U.S. will negotiate through bombs if that means that the pressure will force them to finally relent and agree to a deal. I want you to listen to what Hegseth said about all of this.
You can see when someone's trying to tap on a deal, instead they're going to have tap bombs dropping on key facilities in Iran from the United States of America. If we need to negotiate with bombs, we'll negotiate with bombs, and we're very good at it.
This is quite different, Kate, from what we had been hearing, I'd remind you, from top Trump officials and the president himself for weeks now throughout this ceasefire, continuing pressing pause to try and allow these diplomatic talks to breathe. Now they are essentially trying to use these bombs as leverage. Now, if you listen to what the president said yesterday, I'd remind you that earlier in the day, he had posted that Iran had, quote, taken too long to negotiate a deal that would have been great for them. Now they will pay the price. He had previewed in the Oval Office that they were going to be issuing more strikes on Tehran. I think this is notable. We saw him do it the day before as well. This idea that he is warning Iran that strikes are coming. I think that continues to add to this idea that he is trying to pressure them and force them to the table. Now, what was also interesting is the president kind of echoed this sentiment when he spoke with Fox News yesterday. Fox News reporter said that he actually called him from the Situation Room, just remarkable in and of itself. But then he went on to say that the Iranians had called him and asked him to stop the bombing, but that they would continue unless Iran agreed to a deal. So this is where we are right now. I will say, from the conversations I've had, they still want a deal. The ultimate goal here is still diplomacy, but the president has clearly gotten impatient and is now trying to use these strikes as a way to force this deal sooner rather than later, Kate.
Yeah, and count this as another day of stretching the bounds and definition of a ceasefire over there right now. Elena, thanks so much. Let's see what happens, because it sure seems like a lot is happening as we speak.
Yeah, and we're getting a look at actually what this is looking like on the ground in Iran as those negotiations continue. That dynamic moves forward. We want to go straight to Tehran, where CNN's Fred Pleiken is standing by live. We should note CNN operates in Iran only with the permission of the government, but does maintain full editorial control of its reports. Fred, what is the latest there on the ground?
Hi there, Omar. Well, first of all, the Iranians are completely denying that they called President Trump last night and demanded an end to these strikes. Several Iranian news agencies and official channels also saying that simply is not true. And then as far as negotiating through bombing is concerned, that's also something where Iranian officials are saying that bombing is going to achieve exactly the opposite of what the president wants it to achieve. I actually spoke to a senior Iranian official just a couple of hours ago, and he told me that from the Iranian perspective, they believe that the Trump administration needs to respect the resilience of the Iranians, also needs to respect the military capability of the Iranians as well. specifically looking at the Strait of Hormuz. And I asked that official whether or not there was a chance that the two countries would go back to war. And he said it all depends on the Trump administration right now. If they want to make a deal, if they stop firing, then there can be a deal. However, if they continue to bomb Iran, then a full-on war and a return to full-on war is certainly something that is fairly possible. So right now, certainly these negotiations still in a very difficult state. On their perspective, have said that this was a serious breach of the ceasefire, what happened last night and the night before. At the same time, both sides are still saying that they want to move towards that memorandum of understanding, which we have to say is just the next step in these negotiations that would end the hostilities between the two countries and then lead to a period of larger negotiations for a possible full peace agreement. But again, right now, especially after what happened last night, it seems a little bit more difficult. But certainly from what was also going on here overnight, we certainly had a busy night here in Tehran. It certainly seems as that diplomatic process is still on. One of the things that happened was that during these overnight hours, even as the bombing was going on, Omar, there was a team of Qatari negotiators here on the ground in Tehran trying to move that process forward. Those negotiators have now left. We're going to wait and see whether or not much progress was made on that. Certainly, again, the Iranians are saying they're up for a deal. At the same time, if the U.S. keeps pressing and especially dropping bombs, it will have exactly the opposite effect, Omar.
Fred Pleiken on the ground for us in Tehran. Thank you for the reporting.
Joining me now, former Defense Intelligence official Major Harrison Mann. It's good to have you with us this morning. So we heard from Secretary Hegseth there saying, we will continue to negotiate with bombs. Is that actually the way to get Iran to the table? It does not seem to be working in this moment.
Hi, Erica. We know for certain from recent history that it is not the way to get Iran to negotiate. They tried bombing Iran for 40 days. It didn't work. Then they tried the blockade for another 2 months. That hasn't worked, and they're out of ideas. So I guess they're trying to bomb a second time. It's unfortunate because I think there is still a possibility for peace when the Trump administration gets serious about actually negotiating, which is going to require making some concessions. But for now, they're clearly not willing to do that. And so they're going to start bombing again. The other really worrying escalation we saw yesterday was an apparent war crime, a U.S. targeted precision strike on a water reservoir for drinking water in Iran near Hormuz. And that's something Trump has threatened several times over the past 8 weeks, when he got frustrated with the ceasefire. And I'm hoping we don't see more war crimes, targeting of civilian infrastructure as a deliberate strategy to try and bring Iran to the table.
Certainly, there are a lot of questions about that, and questions in dissent come for more clarity, right, on what the exact targets were in terms of that and whether that water plant was one of them. As we look at where things stand this morning, to your point about getting serious about the negotiations, we have heard so much from President Trump publicly. And CNN did an excellent analysis by our colleague Aaron Blake earlier this week about the number of times that President Trump has said we're close to a deal. We've heard it in the last several days. There is so much public posturing from this president. Are you concerned at all that could weaken the U.S. position?
I think it already has weakened the U.S. position. What the Iranian side understood at the start of the war, which let's remember began when Trump and Netanyahu bombed in the middle of negotiations, is that it's very hard to trust Donald Trump, and Trump's constant lying, both in public and maybe to the Iranian side, has only further undermined that trust. So when it looks like maybe they're making progress towards a deal and then Trump comes out and leaks some of the details, or he just starts making really outrageous threats, that's going to make it even harder for him to earn the trust of his negotiating counterpart and get them to actually agree to something. And I think that's why we're seeing a increased willingness from the Iranian government to go back to full-scale war, because they don't really think at this point that there's any other way to convince Trump to negotiate in good faith.
When this war began, of course, it was the U.S. and Israel. When this war began, when it comes to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu put out this statement yesterday, this message, I should say, for the people of Lebanon. I want to play that for you.
I have a message for you, the people of Lebanon. Israel is not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, that has taken your country hostage, that does Iran's bidding, that uses your territory to launch terrorist attacks against Israel. Do you remember what Lebanon was like before Iran and Hezbollah turned it into a nightmare? And once Hezbollah is dismantled, the possibilities are endless, and they are sky high.
That's notable, of course, coming on the heels of Iran and Israel trading strikes earlier in the week, specifically on Sunday. On Sunday, too, in the wake of Iran's missiles, President Trump told the Financial Times in an interview that Israel is going to have to accept whatever deal the U.S. makes with Iran and that Israel doesn't call the shots. Based on what we're seeing, how much sway, how much influence do you think this president actually has when it comes to Prime Minister Netanyahu and the decisions that Israel is making?
So a reminder that President Trump and any U.S. president has nearly infinite leverage over the Israeli government. Essentially, their Air Force can't fly without our support. You know, it's not just bombs and aircraft and supply parts. You know, we have U.S. troops on Israeli soil defending the skies of Israel so those planes can safely land. We supply the fuel that goes into those aircraft. So if Trump wanted to use it, I'm pretty confident that he could end any Israeli military aggression that he wanted to. And we can see that he wants to do that a little bit, but clearly not enough that it's deterred Netanyahu from launching what potentially started this escalation, which was an Israeli strike on Beirut on Sunday. So Trump is still kind of trying to end the war with half measures, and it's clear that that's not going to work. He's going to have to do some difficult things, including actually putting his foot down with Netanyahu, as well as possibly making some concessions to the Iranian government. And unfortunately, I don't think he feels the urgency to do either of those things because they could both be politically costly. And he's not going to feel that urgency until maybe we've seen another round of full-scale war that's totally unnecessary.
Major Harrison, man, really appreciate your insight this morning. Thank you.